Rohit Kanai, chair, co-leader of the WP.
Thank you very much, Brother Kadaki. Good morning to the media and to the viewing and listening public. Since President Ali's announcement of its government's intention to give a one-off cash transfer to Guyanese, there has been a flurry of discussion in the public media and within the wider society. WPA is not surprised at this development. We recall a similar mass interest when Professor Clive Thomas first put the idea on the agenda at the annual AUC Guyana Emancipation Symposium held in Buxton in August of 2018. We recall that many of the major political players were either lukewarm or dismissive of the proposal, but it was clear that it had captured the imagination of the masses, especially the working people and the poor. Despite the skepticism from the political elites, the WPA has kept the idea in the public arena. We remain convinced that a universal basic income in the form of cash transfers is one of the most effective means of reducing poverty in Guyana. Our oil and gas windfall affords us a golden opportunity to implement this idea, which has been successfully adopted in many countries across the world. Indeed, the United Nations has adopted it as part of its sustainable development goals. For the WPA, this matter of the cash transfer is rooted in our commitment to alleviate poverty as a developmental goal. It goes beyond politicking. WPA is therefore heartened that some of the initial skeptics have warmed to the idea as a serious policy initiative. In this regard, the PPP's attempt to utilize it as a political gimmick should not diminish its seriousness. While WPA does not claim ownership of the idea, we are proud to have been the first Guyanese political party to place it on the national development agenda. What is now patently clear is that it is the only area of the oil and gas discourse that the broad masses of Guyanese feel connected to. Attempts by Vice President Jagdeo to claim ownership of the idea should be treated as a form of desperation by a government which has failed to generate any serious policies since taking office in 2020. Further, the president's swift reversal of the initial announcement points to a lack of thought and foresight on the government's part. Had the government heeded the WPA's call for a feasibility study before implementation, it would not have found itself in such an embarrassing situation. Since its initial rollout in 2018, WPA has been updating what we now call the Buxton proposal. We are thankful to Professor Clive Thomas and the WPA's policy committee for the work they have put in this regard. Given the renewed interest, we feel the time has come to again engage the public on the matter, hence this press conference. We hope in the process to give the WPA take on some of the questions which have been animating the public discourse since the president's initial announcement. End of statement.
Yes, I'm willing to engage in response to any questions that are raised. But I think it's important, following from the statement that was just made, to make a couple of observations. One of them is that the Buxton proposal is rooted in the family, is rooted in the household, it is rooted in social agents, it's rooted, therefore, in the society of Guyana. And this, as Dr. Hines has pointed out in the statement, remains one of the few instances where people feel connected themselves directly to the possibilities or the findings or discoveries in oil and gas. To my mind, it's shameful that the government can go to the extent of saying that they will give this to households and then turn around and change their mind and decide to give it to every eligible voter. Because what else is an adult over 18 but an eligible voter? And this, to my mind, is a scandal of very high proportions. People do not decide on what households are in any country, including Guyana, which I might say, because I'm familiar with the processes in Guyana, do not arrive at a notion of a family or a household willy-nilly. They don't sit in an office and do that. They do experiments, social experiments, as we have done in Guyana for many years, decades, to arrive at what considerations respond statistically to opportunities for being able to capture the nature of a household. And two sayings come to mind, two figures of speech. One is that they share a common pot and they share a common roof. That is not a deduction of somebody's intellect. It's an observation that has been made in practice. And I think that is a disrespect to all those researchers, agencies around the world, World Bank, IMF, United Nations, Inter-American Development Bank, all these agencies that have UNICEF that have poured eons of money in trying to develop concepts to support empirical research in Guyana. And they have established that the two single most correlating indicators to what is a household is in fact a common pot and a common roof. A common pot is not just a place where you put food in. It's making the decision about what you're going to put in the pot, making decisions about how you're going to finance it, making decisions about who's going to buy and create the opportunities for having a pot, getting the food, going to the market. It's also made with the consideration of what different people in the household need within a pot. Because children don't have the same nutrition needs as adults. All these things go to make a pot, and therefore they're collective social decisions. And that's the foundation of a household. We have a social unit. This is something that we can't just substitute with calling for anybody who's eligible to vote, because that is what it boils down to. That is what defines a person who has an ID card and who is over 18. Crude, nasty, and awful. And we should not turn ourselves into that type of person. Similarly, a common roof is not even a house where you might not have a roof. Some people sleep on tarpaulins. Some people sleep in tents. Some people sleep on the bottom house and that's under people's floors. You don't have to have a common roof that is a traditional roof. It's a place that they join in common abode. And this can be established and has been established empirically. It's an insult to the Bureau of Statistics that we should deny them the opportunity of an inventive contribution made to social studies around the world by ignoring it. And it shows the ignorance of the people who make these decisions in Guyana. There are utter callousness and disregard for what is important in developing us and making us better human beings. I therefore want to make that observation here because I know people jumping around saying, well, it's better to give the 2 people that I could get back 200,000. But what about the family that has 4 children? How do you accommodate their needs? They may even be teenage mothers who have not yet reached the age of 18. All these considerations come to play. And I believe that we should proceed with science-based analysis. And we should therefore rely on the Bureau of Statistics. And I'm very disappointed that that is not the case. I think the other important point that is to be made, that this is a handout. And it is called a handout because it's given under a program that is not worked out in terms of time. There's no guarantee it will be repeated. There's no stated regularity in it. So people can't even use it as a potential borrowing money. It's not a financial asset they're accumulating. They're getting it once for all a handout. They don't know when it's coming next. This is not a time-bound, serious social executed project. This is a gamble to get what the definition of the recipients of the money are defined as people who vote. And the vote gathering machine, I think that's the shameful part of it. And I therefore take great offense and think the party should take great offense that we should degenerate every single idea in our country to somebody's hustle. Those are the 2 additional points I want to make, but I'm open to any discussion based on what we have sent out to people. We sent an entire copy of the revised version of the last revised version in print of the box of proposal. This was in 2022, last couple of years ago. And therefore I'm willing to respond to any questions they might raise.
Professor Clive Thomas, good evening. Welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. Wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from inside Guyana or outside of Guyana, North America, the wider Caribbean, South America, Central America, whether you're joining us from Europe or further afield, whether you're joining us from Africa, some of you are, or in Asia, welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. I have known Professor Clive Thomas since I was a little boy in short pants. I usually tell the story that when the early WPA would come to Buxton to hold public meetings, Walter Rodney, Clive Thomas, Kwayana, Moses Bagwan, Sase Omo, Takuma Ogunse, and later on, people like Andai and Rupert Rupnarayan who came back after the early days. We young boys and girls, we wanted to hear Walter Rodney. And, we were 13, 14, 15. You stop play cricket early on that afternoon and you're gone to the line top and you want to hear Walter Rodney, because he was the young firebrand. But I observed at that time that the older men, the farmers, the cane farmers, the vegetable farmers would come out early from the back dam. Usually they would come out at 5, 6 o'clock. But whenever the WPA's hold the meeting and Clive Thomas is listed as a speaker, they would come out early, 2, 3 o'clock, they don't come out, put on their shot and pans, and they come at the line top and waiting for the WPA meeting. And they would listen to Walter Rodney, but they were more interested in Clive Thomas. And our young minds didn't figure out what was happening there. It was not until later that I talking to those older men and women, they would say Clive Thomas was talking about what we were doing to make a living. He was talking about cane farming. He was talking about economics. He was talking about household. He was talking about farming and peasantry. He was talking about the market. And we as elders, that is what our lives were about. And so therefore, Professor Clive Thomas has been in this business for a long time. And 2 weeks ago, when the president made his announcement in the parliament that his government was going to give a cash transfer of $200,000 to households, well, all hell broke loose. Later on, the president changed his mind and said he would give it to individuals. The point I'm trying to make here is this. From the time oil and gas was found in Guyana, there have been so many conversations. There has been talk about renewing the contract, revising the contract. There's been talk about the environment and if there are spills, what could happen. There has been talk about spending money on infrastructure. There has been talk about the Natural Resource Fund, and there have been all kinds of topics. But I challenge anybody to doubt that the one issue that the broad masses of Guyanese people, whether they're young or old, whether they're Indian, Amerindian, or African, whether they're woman or man, whether they're Portuguese or Chinese, whether they are 10 years old or 20 years old or 60 years old, it is the one issue that has generated interest in the masses. Some people are interested in the contract being renewed. Some people are interested in them and their infrastructure story. Some people are interested in the oil spill and what we'll do to Guyana. Some. But on this issue of the cash transfer, I can tell you, and none of you can doubt, it has generated discussion among Guyanese of all walks of life inside of Guyana and outside of Guyana. What does that tell us? It tells us that it is the cash transfer is the single most important policy initiative that speaks directly to the masses of Guyanese. There's no accident. If those of you could remember when Professor Thomas first made the proposal in Buxton, my home village, in August of 2018, there was non-stop discussion for almost a year. Everybody was weighing in. I remember walking the villages and the towns and moving around and people shouting, yes, $1 million, $1 million. Over time, you know, the interest waned a little because the powers that be, the political elites on both sides of the divide, never embraced it. And what Ali did was to open up the can of worms again. And if you notice, everybody and their sister-in-law, their mother-in-law, they're talking about cash transfers. It is the single most important issue around oil and gas that catches the attention of the Guyanese people. WPA doesn't claim ownership of this idea. What we do claim is that we are the first political party in Guyana that put this on the agenda. And where we lead, others followed. Others followed. That happens. We have followed other parties in terms of their ideas, and they followed us. The cash transfer in Guyana is the brainchild of Professor Clive Yolanda Thomas, C.Y. Thomas. Let's get that on the table. And no attempt to deny him that credit will pass. And so therefore, we waited for all and sundry. If they take on whether they think it should go to individual or household or how they think and how much, and then Professor Clive Thomas speaks. This morning, as you heard there from that clip, the WPA held a press conference and Professor Clive Thomas spoke. And people were saying, when Ali went to Parliament and announced he going to give the cash grant, that was a game changer. No, that wasn't a game changer because President Ali didn't know what he was talking about. He still doesn't know. That is why they're in the doo-doo that they're in. When you listen to Professor Clive Thomas there, he knows what he's talking about. He knows what's a household. He knows what's an individual. This has been his life's work. He's been doing this since Noah was a scout in shard pans. Good evening. Please share the link. And so we had a press conference this morning and Professor Thomas was able to shed some light. And we hope that he has been able to clarify a lot of the doubts. Now, we understand that as workers, as ordinary people, there are things that we instinctively respond to. And so when Ali said he was giving it to households, there was a big debate. Should it be households or individuals? He then changed his mind and said he will give it to individuals. People like myself held on to the household, but said, well, perhaps we can do a hybrid of household and individuals. Today, Clive Thomas has spoken. And what is clear is, first of all, what the amount that they're given, whether it is household or individuals, is way below what Guyanese deserve, given the amount that we're earning now and given the oil reserves that we have. Exxon says it's 11 billion barrels. The government of Guyana says it's 24 billion barrels. WPA says it's 28 to 30 billion barrels. And so our calculations are based on what we're getting now. This year we're getting almost 600 billion Guyana dollars from oil. And that we are sitting, as I'm saying, on 28 billion barrels in reserve to 30 billion. And so therefore, 100,000 or 200,000 is a pittance. That's the first thing we want to lay out. And the second thing is, what is the method you're using? Individuals or households? The WPA put on the table households. And clearly, Clive Thomas, who was speaking on our behalf, knew what he was saying when he said households. Not what Professor Thomas says. He says an individual 18 years and over is a voter. Is a voter. An individual 18 years and over with a passport and an ID is a voter. We are isolating that demographic, the voters. So really what the PPP is doing is giving cash grants to voters with individual approach. Clearly they didn't know what is a household. Here Thomas defined household. A man and a woman living under tent, that's a household. A man living in a bottom house is a household. And a woman living is a household. a teen mother, a mother who is 16 or 17 years old with 2 or 3 children, and we know that we have a lot of those instances in Guyana. That young lady, 17 years old, with 2 children, that's a household. But with the individual thing, she's out because she's not 18 years old. She's not a voter because she's not 18 years old, so she can't get a cash grant that is designed for voters. How many of us know teen mothers and teen fathers with children? The individual thing locks them out. Sisters and brothers, there is no substitute for thought. For thought. Some people are good implementers, meaning that other people do the thinking, do the thought, do the research, and then the others are very good at implementing. But you have to have the idea, the thought, the vision. When I heard Professor Thomas give that definition today and said 18 years and over is you're giving it to voters. It's a targeted cash transfer. It's not universal. It's targeted to voters because you're leaving out households that are headed by people who are not 18 years old. Now, I understand, and we understand, why a lot of us felt, a lot of you felt, that the individual things would be better. But that's where people like Clive Thomas come in, because they have thought this thing through. And they've realized that the individual approach would exclude a lot of people. And whereas the cash transfer is meant to include everybody, especially the poor, including those who are heading households who are not 18 years old. There is no substitute for thought, for knowledge. That proposals must be knowledge-based. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. We are doing it tonight. We are doing it tonight because we have to clarify things. They say the WPA is the intellectual party. Sometimes they say that to cuss us. But tonight we're going to claim that mantle because I think there are things that only people like Clive Thomas can clarify for us. Not many of us would have thought. All of us know some 17-year-old, 16-year-old that got children. All of us know that. But because we are not the ones who are thinking through the idea, when we say we're going for the individual thing, we are thinking about ourselves. We are not necessarily thinking about that teenage mother with 2 or 3 children, and that we are leaving that family out. Not just leaving the teenage mother out, but leaving her children out. She and her 2 children are left out of the distribution of this handout because it's not a cash transfer, it's a handout. They're left out because we are thinking that as individuals, we're going to benefit. And we're not seeing, because a lot of people who were saying they prefer the individual thing, they were thinking the 200,000 going to be for individual, and they slash it to 200,000. Good evening, welcome to Politics 101. It is the place to be. With me tonight is Brother Takuma Ogunse, co-leader of the WPA and longtime political activist, who probably knows Clive Thomas, certainly knows Clive Thomas better than me, and knows Clive Thomas better than most of us, and who has been thinking about this thing, because that's what we in the WPA, we have been thinking this thing through. challenges are there when you're implementing any policy. There are challenges. And sometimes we look for the easy way out. We look to include 5 people and not realizing in trying to include 5 people, we're excluding 500. And that is what we may have done with this individual thing that a lot of us kind of embrace, a lot of people embraced it, But like I said, I am not blaming you all. Can't blame you all. You all are not economists. We need, and it is a shame. It's a shame that even the media, when all of this is swirling around, did not reach out to Clive Thomas and said, Professor, you are the man who put the thing in this table. It's you, brainchild. Tell me. But anyhow, we are moving on, and WPA is going nowhere because God forbid if we were to fall up and say no more WPA. Cactus and pepper. Brother Ogunse.
Good evening, I'm Dr. Hines, and good evening to your viewers.
You were on that press conference this morning. You're, of course, part of the executive of the WPA. You're a co-leader of the party. You're a founding member of the WPA. As you listen to Clive Thomas this morning, against the background of what we've been chatting about for the last 2 weeks, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, I'm okay. I have some mixed responses to it, because on the one hand, okay, I was happy that Dr. Thomas came out and redirect the proposal and the discussion to its correct place, because from the start, this was an anti-poverty proposal. So I'm glad for that, and we will discuss that a little more. But I'm also sad to, to realize, as you listen to Clive Thomas, that some basic fundamental things as a nation, we expose ourselves, to the rest of the world, Caribbean, the world, as a people who are not being serious about their own business. I mean, as Thomas correctly pointed out, we have been working with the concept of households for many decades. The methodology is well established. There's the statistical bureau and so forth and so forth. And these are international concepts that have been financed by all kinds of international agencies that Guyana benefit from in carrying out this survey. And your government, it is one thing for the population. The ordinary person may not, and is not expected to always be up to date on these things. But your government, when your government is responding and implementing a proposal, one expect that government would first respect itself as a government, respect the nation and the national institutions, and to engage, the discussion in a professional way. Even if you want to politicking, but you don't reduce it to the level to which they have reduced it. You wake up one morning, you say you're going to give cash transfer 200,000 to Guyanese households. Okay, it was part of the national discourse for the last 6 years. You come around that you're going to give it as a one-off payment, but you're going to give it to households. And this is why I said I was divided. I listened to Clive, so this morning I was also divided, because we, on our program, had we had said, look, Jagdio, who is in control of this process, is a kind of politician that will say one thing today and he would say another thing tomorrow. And honestly, I didn't expect him to change so quickly. And then I apply a kind of cynical approach to it. I said, probably is David and the program, WPA program, that beat him down by pointing out this is a WPA CY Thomas proposal, that he decided, all right, since you are saying it's your proposal, I'm going to jump to the PNC man proposal. I play y'all. Okay, and you fight now whether I following the WPA proposal or for the PNC proposal. I mean, that was part of my my initial response, but then one got to get a little more serious. And then you realize that what you're dealing with is clear attempt by the government to take advantage of the poverty in the society in order to win votes for the elections. And Dr. Thomas is very clinical, and I haven't seen him in that mood for a long time. I mean, he's coming out of an illness, so he's not in 100% best of physical strength and so forth. But if you listen to him and you know Clive, okay, there was a genuine bitterness there and great disappointment and sadness to be a Guyanese faced with the behavior of this government. That every important transformative idea that could really push Guyana forward and to help to move the living standards and the condition of people and to lift the profile of the country as a serious country trying to deal with challenges from colonialism and slavery. The PPP government and company reduce everything to getting a vote. So they reduce, and they're taking the national purse to buy votes, and then they tell us we are engaging in building democracy, and they want you to behave and enhance what they're doing in the country as part of some democratic process. You know, and that is why I listened to Clive. I had these divided emotions.
Divided emotions, indeed. A government that is taking timely things that have been defined and settled, and really making a mess of it. And the thing is that they're taking advantage of the poverty of the people, but they're also taking advantage of the fact that the people, ordinary Guyanese, the regular man, woman, young person, is going about his or her daily life, trying to stay alive, trying to survive, and is not going to read an economics book to figure out what is an household. But they know what an household is because they are part of households. You know, and rather than opening up a possibility for them to insert themselves into this thing called household, what you do is that you give the household a bad name and say the household is confusing and the household is this. And so in a sense, what you're doing is depriving your people from linking their own experience because they live in households. They live in households. Even if you're an individual man, a bachelor, you still got your child mother, you still got your girlfriend, you still got, we are a nation of households. You get your mother, you get your goddaughter, we are a nation of households. And so with one fell swoop, what this government has done is in a sense begin to give households a bad name. Rather than say, when people raise the cry and say, look, if we go with households, you're going to exclude me because they got 6 adults in this house here, and we're gonna get $100,000. Instead of saying, no. You have 6 adults under that roof, but you have 6 households there. Because if each person or each group of persons, let's say, you have 6 adults, 3 families, but you have a 3 household, there's 4 households. Instead of doing that, you then say, household is not important. And so begin to poison your people against their own reality. Because, like I said, our reality is a household reality. And so this is the dangerousness of this government in creating a kind of society that becomes spineless, that becomes the hustling. You know, I said on this program, but Ogunse last week, that this government is busy turning Black people and Amerindian people into hustlers, low-class hustlers, and turning Indian people into a kind of middle-class hustlers. But more than that, turning Indian people into a group of people who are condoning that, to see the pain of other groups and to curse those groups when they're crying out for their pain. They're condoning them to say, you may be poor, but you're better than Amerindians and you're better than Africa. It's a dangerous development in the history of our country. Takumo Ogunse, your thoughts?
Yeah, you're quite correct. And it is, we all know as political people that the racial contradiction is a consequence of slavery, indention, colonialism. And we know it is the technique used by the white people of divide and rule. But one expects that independence and nation building is an opportunity for us to reverse that kind of behavior. And this government is the only government since independence that have deliberately, willfully, adopt in the most negative way the use of divide and rule and the use of aggravating racial relations in the country. Rather than setting the stage for racial healing, they are setting the stage for racial explosion. And they're using the oil money in these recent times to accelerate, that process. And, the country really, for the first time, I think both Jagom Burnham and all of the national leaders who have passed must be turning in their grave. None of our leaders were perfect leaders and perfect politicians, but I can't remember having a sense that any of the past leaders were so degenerate. And this present degeneration, benefited by seeing the flaws or the shortcoming of previous leaders. And they ignore that, so there's no excuse for them. What they're doing is deliberate. So they are the most oppressive, there's the most negative leaders, that we have produced. They're the most uncaring set of rulers. And we have to call a spade a spade. But the fact that they are the problem, and and this is why it is important for us as WP and as part of the political opposition, while we fight them, we try to fight in a way that could narrow the negative consequences of a racial configuration. I don't know we could control it, because these things are not things that in the hands of the opposition willy-nilly. These things got their own life. And when a government behaves in a certain way, things could happen. But we will have to try our best. But at the same time, we have to appeal to people to recognize what is happening here. They are trying to socialize the country and take advantage of young people to believe that your social survival is based in individualism.
Yeah.
That the history of human survival is a collective behavior and family and the collective thing. And so I listen to some young people who get caught up with this idea, getting the 200,000 when it was 200,000, and some of them, now it's 100,000. And I ask them, wait, you really would give up, okay, $1 million Guyana dollars every year for a one-off payment of 100,000 or 200,000 Guyana dollars? I mean, you're a young person. Okay, you may say you got a household, but 8 months after you pregnant a young lady, within a year you become now a household. Are you giving up $1 million a year at a time where you know in more economic pressure because you got a wife, family, and children, a child, and you got to pay a house? So it is it's a short-term view that accepting a one-off 100,000, okay, in any way, is a reflection of any concern, okay, for your interest in any profound way. It is the $1 million continuous, okay, cash transfer, which will guarantee you those who are leaders of household now and those who are leaders of household in the next 8 months or 12 months. Because that's how society works. Some of you may not be household at this month, but next
That's
year,
right.
they'll be household. And we have to keep reminding people that initially this is a proposal to end or to reduce poverty. And that's what you got to keep in mind. That if you're dealing with proposal that will impact your life in such a way to insulate you to some extent from being below the poverty line. And that is the thing that we got to keep pressing to Guyanese. But the PPP's proposal is to get votes. It's election time. And once they get you voted, done with you.
They're done with you. And that is exactly what we are doing. Remington is saying that there is no sound. You all please tell me, is there no sound or is something is wrong with Remington's system? Are you hearing us? Are you hearing us? I only see the this coming from Remington. Remington, I think it might be your system. Colin is saying that he's hearing us loud and clear. Yes, they're all saying they're hearing us loud and clear. Good evening to all of you. Brother Ogonse, we're a political party. And of course, we want, when elections time come around, for people to vote for us, whether as a party or whether as part of a coalition. And even if we're part of a coalition, that you go and you vote for that coalition, and if you like the WP, you say, I am voting for this coalition because of WP. So in effect, you're casting your vote for the WP. So we are a political party and we are being realistic. In an election, you want votes. But I want us to stress, as we've been stressing all the time, that when we come to things like the cash transfer, this is not about a vote. The vote will come as a result of us taking initiatives. But this is about getting rid of poverty for all Guyanese, regardless of whether you're PPP, PNC, AFC, WPA, or whoever else. It is about our country. And so therefore, we have to continue to stress that to Guyanese people. Now, when Professor Thomas first put this idea on the agenda in 2018, and he calculated based on his research that if we have, I think, 5 billion barrels of oil at a time, when everybody else was saying we don't even have 1 billion barrels, Thomas did his research and said we will get upwards of 500 billion, 5 billion barrels of oil. And it was based on that he calculated that we could, once the oil begins to flow, we could give each Guyanese $5,000 US, with $1 million Guyana dollars per year. Today, Exxon is saying we have 11 billion. The government is saying we have 24 billion. Professor Clive Thomas again is saying we have between 28 and 30 billion. And as a result of that, that 5,000 US dollars is not enough for a cash transfer to Guyanese. Guyanese people can get more because we have more oil and we are getting more money. This year alone, we're getting 600 billion Guyanese dollars from oil and gas. And so my question to you here, Brother Ogun, is to tell us why those calculations are important in terms of when we talk about things like cash transfers.
Okay, the first thing we got to recognize that you could put aside the total reserves or that are anticipated reserves that we have. When Clive Thomas and the WPA first broke the proposal, we were talking, as you correctly point out, about 5 billion barrels. But since then, okay, we know what we know. And more importantly, the monies that the government receive from oil production to date allows them to pay more than 5,000 US to household annually. So on the basis of the collections of funds that they have already collected, not to talk about when another well come into production, where we got 3 wells in production, so we can get other wells in production. So the point I'm trying to make, that right now, the government is in a position, and based upon the price of oil and the revenues that they're collecting, the 10%, okay, will give Guyanese households more than 1 million Guyana dollars right now if it was applied today. And we have to keep these monetary, arguments at the forefront of people's consciousness. So it is not a question anymore about whether we have the capacity to pay. We have long gone past the capacity to pay. It's whether we have the political willingness to pay. And clearly, the political leadership of the country don't have the willingness to pay the people their own money to deal with poverty. And the people have not reached a point where they're ready to take to the streets to demand the cash transfer. And I'm saying that these numbers are important to help build up the consciousness of the masses, because as we, the WPA, have predicted, and we said it during the 2020 elections when we spoke on our platform, because the APMU AFC had literally banned any discussion of cash transfer on the APMU AFC platform. We as WPA, when we held our own meetings to support the coalition, we made it very clear. We made some clear commitments to Guyanese, and this is important for us as a party. We said, regardless of which party wins the elections, the WPA will continue to be relentless in its fight for the implementation of the cash transfer to Guyanese households. And to date, we have kept our position. The next stage is for us to get people on the road at some point, calling and demanding that whoever is in government, okay, that they implement this policy. Because as I said before, and we have said before, given the projected revenues and given the fact that we have found 30-something to 40 wells, we only have 3 wells in operation, in production. Imagine when we have 10 wells in production. Any government could go to the Guyanese and tell them that you can't pay a universal cash transfer. So for us, this is not politics. This simply is not politics in the narrow partisan sense. This is politics in a more profound sense. That the money in the first place is the people's money, and the people have a right to determine the priority on how the government use their own money. And it's only a stupid people that said they want all the money to be, or most of the money to be spent on infrastructure and leave we in profound poverty. No set of people, any part of the planet, if they're given a choice between infrastructure and their development as a people, they're going to go first and foremost for the development as a people. Infrastructure, as we said, is important, but there have to be the balance. I listen very carefully to a lot of, since we have a lot of old people who have died without having really enjoy any benefits from the oil, because a lot of old people say the pension should be about 100,000. I really think that pension should be about 100,000. So a few old people who may not live the next 5-10 years, at least they could go to the maker knowing that at least I was a beneficiary, of this oil wealth. I mean, it's criminal that we can't do these things. And that is why keeping the numbers and the money and the discussion in the forefront of the politics and the public space is important.
It is important. That point you're making about old people. A couple of years ago, I remember when Valda Lawrence of the PNC came out and supported the cash transfer. She did so. She said she know of a lot of old people who have worked for this country, worked their asses off for this country, and they're about to go back to their maker. And she is supporting the cash transfer because she wants them to enjoy a couple pennies before they die. And so when you make that point, I remember Valda Lawrence. God bless Valda, because the point is that she was linking the cash transfer not to politics and vote, but to people's lives. And in this case, all people who perhaps the first time in their life, if they get $1 million, will see what $1 million look like. Perhaps the first thing in their life before they're dead. And this is what we are talking about in the WPA. It's not about giving for votes. Votes will always come. But poverty has been around from the days of the Middle Passage and before to the present. And I dare say, Brother Ogunsi, that I think I did some reading and some studying in my time. And I've never seen anywhere where infrastructure has helped to reduce poverty. I'm not saying that infrastructure is not important. You're not saying it. But what is the outcome? If your outcome is getting rid of poverty, infrastructure is not the place to spend 60% of your budget. It is criminal. Criminal. And we want our people to understand this government is engaged in criminality. Criminality against the people of this country. They should be taken to the World Court for crimes against humanity, because that is what they're involved in. My brother Thomas this morning reminded us of a demographic. Young teenagers with children, with families, below 18, with families. And when he said that, my heart fluttered, as they say, because I know, you know, all of us on this live, we know some young person or persons who are in that situation. This turn against the household towards individual, yes, it may put $100,000 in an individual hand, but your granddaughter or your daughter who is 17 years old with 2 children, you are denying her or access to the patrimony of this country. Takungo say, help me out.
Yes, you're quite right, and that demonstrates the difference between Thomas' understanding of these matters and the government. You could say even the rest of us, because I mean, he's a professional. He have been engaged in developmental economics for his entire professional life, and as I said, at the previous program, in terms of illness, all of us as human beings, the masses, got a sense, what the illness may be, or feeling good, getting a little headache and thing and so. But the doctor got a more profound understanding of what happening to you. And it's the same thing. Thomas, okay, because he, in this case, is the doctor. He got a profound understanding of what he had proposed. And he knows, okay, he had diagnosed the illness. And for he, the illness is not a government getting back in power. The illness is dealing with poverty regardless of who is in charge of government. So his lens, okay, has been conditioned to look to these objective realities. And it's not by accident he was able to remind us that there's a demographics there that you're victimizing with your proposed, payment to individual, and you were leaving out one of the most vulnerable, the most probably vulnerable, okay, demographics in the equation. And I think that the nation should play a special honor to Dr. Thomas to remind us that as we proceed with these things, we have to have in our forefront the most vulnerable. Because if you have the most vulnerable in mind in your forefront of what you do, your chances of making certain mistakes will be minimal. And I think that that is the power of that observation.
The power of that observation. Again, I say, those of you who are, in a household with a mother and a father, and you say, well, look, if you go to the household, only one we gonna get. You go with individual, two we gonna get. When you go with individual, and each of you get 100,000, but your daughter or your son, your teenage daughter, your son, with two children, you get 200,000, but they are denied. They are victimized, as Brother Ogun says. You look after yourself, but they are victimized. Your daughter and your grandchildren, your daughter who's 17 years old with two your grand picnic, they get nothing. And all you thinking about is your $100,000 that you get in. Again, I am not cussing our people because they're not the ones who we send to school to read economics books. They're not the ones who we send to figure out our soul and which one is more thin. All right? It is the government. The government. Even if the government is made up of dunces, you have the capacity to hire people who are not dunces. The statistic bureau people, all the institutions, they're the ones who should tell you, boss, I know you're stupid and you believe that this is the way to go. But policies don't work on stupidness. If you go household, this is who are going to benefit. If you go individuals, these are who will benefit and these are who you will block out. That is why feasibility studies, pilot studies are important, my comrades, my sisters and brothers. That is why it is important. And here we are, bigging ourselves up for getting $100,000 handout because we feel that the other thing will exclude us. And not thinking that if you go household and you add up what you're going to get from you and your wife and your mother, and add up with what your daughter and your grand picnic they're going to get, taken together, you would be in a better place as a family. This individualistic thing has to stop. The PPP is doing Guyana a bad, bad, bad number that it will take decades for us to fix. When the PPP is done with black people, they will cut their mother-in-law throat for $40,000. They will shoot their brother for $40,000. That is what the PPP is aiming at. Look at what they do to Brutus. Look at what they do to Brutus. Get the Brutuses of this world licking down, shooting people at Golden Grove. Not Brutus himself, but he's part of the force, the top level of the force. When they're shooting people at Linden, shooting people at Moko, shooting people at Golden Grove, the Brutuses of this world said nothing. Because they want a big fat bank account with $500 million. And now, the PPP hold on for the $500 million. And about to throw him in jail for the rest of his life. Who we going to turn to? I am telling you all, when you all see the Brutus, skin are you beat up on them. Skin are you beat up on them. Do not accept the Brutuses of this world back into our communities. They're poisonous because they're prepared to sell us down the line to kill us for $500 million in their bank account. Not forgetting that this PPP is not about love. PPP don't love them. They're using them. Using them. And when the PPP back to the wall, they throw them to the wolves. We must not accept the Brutuses of this world back into our community. Let it go to hell, because that's what they deserve. And so we are at a critical point. When they finish with us, if they continue at this rate, they will corrupt the entire black Amerindian communities and Indian communities, because they're corrupting Indians in a different way, but corrupting them nevertheless. They're socializing an Indian community to watch their black brothers and sisters getting beat up, shoot down, the house broke down, and don't feel. They're creating an unfeeling Indian community. And they're creating a corrupt black community. And when they're finished with our country, if we allow them, it will take us decades to fix back this country. It will take us decades to fix back this country. That is why we have to stop it. No. We have to stop it now. Brother Ogunse, talk to me.
Yes, I quite agree with you, because there comes a point in time, in the life of a country that you have to make up your mind. Are we going to continue on a path that we know where it would lead us? And that path is guaranteed to lead us to destruction. And if we believe as patriots that the country deserves better, then we have a moral and political duty to do what is necessary to force the country to address this problem once and for all. And I think there is where we reach with this government. We have to call a spade, and to say we cannot allow this government to continue the way it is behaving, and in the context of the oil money, in the context of the kind of racial relations and environment they are creating, in the kind of political, governance that they are creating, which is sheer dictatorship, that we have to stop them and stop them now. Now, the elections is a good way to stop them, but you see, the problem we have with elections is that once you agree to them and the people of rig them or to somehow they have to get past you by one vote, you're morally expected to live with the results, and you put yourself in a bad position. Okay, except you say we're participating in these elections, is we're going to take all the elections
under duress.
On the duress, on win or lose, we want shared governance.
Yes, yeah, win or lose. That's the point. I mean, we don't want our viewers and our supporters to get the impression we're anti-election. No. We are for election, but we are saying here are the strengths of elections, here are the weaknesses of election in our situation. And we have to walk on several feet at the same time. That's the whole thing. Yeah. We cannot put all our eggs in one basket. We have to fight at the polling booth, and we have to fight outside of the polling booth, because this thing is serious. This thing is serious. And I am telling you all, brothers and sisters, we are at this critical period. Today, I went on Gordon Mosley page, and they put out the story on the WPA's press conference this morning, and Dr. Thomas proposals. And you can close your eye and don't look at the names. Just look at the comments. Our Indian brothers and sisters, I tell you, let Dr. Thomas carry your old time self, so. What poverty talking about? Them people who they're in poverty, put themselves in poverty because they're damn lazy. Go on Gordon Mosley thing, look under that report and see what our Indian brothers are saying about their black brothers and sisters in the name of supporting the PPP's nonsense. No, I ain't blaming them. They have to take responsibility for what they put there. But I'm not blaming them. I'm blaming the PPP for socializing them that way. And what you are doing there is that you are laying the groundwork for instability and conflict in our society. What do you expect, David Hines, as a black person, as a black leader who stood up for Indian people, when Indian people were under the stick of a black government? And a person like David Hines and a person like Takumo Gunse stood up for Indian people when they were under the heels of a black government. And now when you go and you hear Indian people talking that way about black people, the black people put themselves in poverty. And so the WPA must not be talking about poverty. Black people want to be in poverty. What do you all expect us to do? Sit down and say it's good for black people? I can't do that. Ogun can't do that. We have to stand up and defend the dignity of our people. We have to tell our people to stand up erect. You're human beings, and fight back. And we may not get 100,000 votes for doing that. But at the end of the day, when our country sidesteps what the PPP is pushing us in, the country will be indebted to us. And I'm saying that you all Guyanese people, black, you all have to reward people who stand up for you all. That is a part of our political culture. Oh, David Hines is a lovely chap. Ogunse, like we're saying, you all are radicals. But when it's come to put that X, you all find a reason not to do it. Well, I'm saying you all got to start changing that. You all got to start changing that. You all have to start rewarding people who stand up and put their bodies as a barricade for people walking on you all and want to kill you all physically, economically, and politically in this country. We are at a testing time in our history. And we have to begin We have to begin to make changes to the way we see politics. Takumo Gunse, meat and bread for you.
Yes, and as I keep saying, some people have approached me and say, Ogun, why you always keep mentioning that you're 72 and you in this thing for long? Politics, people don't want to, mention the age. Politicians even want to dress up with tie and suit and look younger than the age and all kinds of things. And, and they're concerned. And I got to explain to them genuinely. I am not a typical politician who just looking for votes and power for the sake of power. I'm concerned with ordinary poor people like myself. I mean, I grew up in poverty. I work in a market for most of my life, and I see how poor people, struggle. I see how, they have a lot of initiative and ideas, but they can't back it with funds. And I understand in a profound way, what happened to people. And I've been able as a person, to be self-employed, can't get rich, but at the same time, enough to keep my head above the water and give me political independence. I ain't got to worry about, no government and go tell me I can't go, don't go to work and so on, so and so. And I try to explain to them that, look, I'm trying to get to the national conscience that this problem that we're postponing, we have been dealing with it for over 70 years. And we have to realize that things mature. Just like how I get old, things, this problem is getting old. And it's going to collapse at some point. And when it collapses, what we don't want, is endless and reckless consequences. And politics is to manage crisis. If we are political people who committed to politics, we have a moral responsibility because we understand where this will lead us. And we have to do what is in our power, to manage it. And I've been saying to African people, and the WP have been saying to the nation, that we will reach a point where we have to put an end to this behavior. And I'm telling you, you only got probably a year. After the year, what happened? Be outside the control. And that is why I try to use my age and longevity in politics to say to people, look, this is not simply, a struggle for power. And Ogunse and WP is simply hustling for power. This thing here is about people and the nation. And we have to bring to bear, our experience. And I'm saying, and we know there's few people in this country. There are people in this country who have been in politics as long as we. But few of them were prepared to take the stand that we're taking to explain the reality, the race reality, and to urge African Guyanese and the nation as a whole to close the show very quickly before we reap the worst, out of it. And I don't know, in any honesty, that I, as a person who have been in politics for so long, and as a person who have been in the WPA for as long as I have been, that I could watch this nation and tell them that the treatment of African Amerindians and the poor and powerless in general is something that is acceptable. It is unacceptable, and it has to stop, and stop very soon. No, we don't have no choice. I don't want to use this example, but it's like in America, when the productive forces have reached a point where America didn't need slavery, they could achieve more politically and economically by the new capitalist rise. They couldn't resolve the problem through political discourse. They end up into civil war.
600,000 of themselves they kill.
No, I mean, we don't want to.
We don't want that.
We don't want to go down the road.
We do not.
No,
We do not.
And
We
our
do not.
leaders must know this is the junction we reach with oil.
Yes, that is
You know,
where
this
we
is
are.
the junction we reach. And we have to stop playing games. And the amount of money we will be getting from oil, man, it could more than and address all the historical injustices in the nation. There is no need anymore for the traditional concerns, okay, that we enter independence with. We have for the first time almost a guaranteed possibility of correcting these historical injustices. And we don't have to take away nothing from anybody. All we have to do is to deal with those who don't have and to improve the system, make it more equitable and so forth and so forth. And when you have a set of political leaders who know and don't want to do that, it's time we got to sweep them away, or they're going to sweep us and the nation away.
The nation away, Takumo Gunse here tonight. You know, I was saying to a friend, an Indian Guyanese friend of mine, very close friend, who was weeping about what could happen next year. And he said, David, be honest with me. And I said, my brother, I'm being honest with you. We have to go to election. What they give me is the winner take all. Somebody gonna win and somebody gonna lose. If the PPP lose, and whether the coalition or PNC or whoever win, Indian people are going to use their wealth to tear down Guyana. They're going to use their wealth to stagnate Guyana. They're going to use their wealth to undermine Guyana. And if the PPP were to win, black people ain't got wealth for use. They're going to use their muscles to undermine and tear down Guyana. That is what we are facing. And we have to be frank about it if we do not change course now. Because the PPP is thinking that all they need to do is to go to black people and give them $40,000 and quiet them. Quiet them. It is not happening. It is not going to happen. And they know that. And our side feel that if we say that Indian people are suffering and so on, it's going to bring them over to us, it's not happening. We have to find a way to say to Indian people, Amerindian people, and African people that this country belongs to all of us. The wealth of this country belongs to all of us. And we have to share it together and we have to live together. And when we talk about sharing power, it's not about black people sharing Indian power or Indian people sharing black people power. It's about Indian power, African power, Amerindian power, and all the others coming together and making it a Guyanese power. That is the only thing will save us. I guarantee you, if the coalition win tomorrow, Indians are not going to take it lying down. They're going to use all them private army that they get, all the money that they're going to get, they're going to give you the lick of Lisbon. I'm not saying that we should not try to win, but we have to win with the eye open and realize that after we win, we get a hell of a job to hold this country together. And if the PPP win, God forbid, that is where Jack Dio is leading our country. And I will be a fool to sit there and to tell you don't fight, because if you fight, we might end up in violence. I have to tell you all, violence is not the answer. And I will never support violence as a solution. I will not support it. But who am I to stop the juggernaut that the state, the government is putting in action? Dr. King, the Prince of Nonviolence, once said, when the brawl starts, I will not be a fire extinguisher putting out the fire. Neither Tukumo Gunse or David Hines or Aubrey Norton or Nigel Hughes can be a fire extinguisher to put out the fire that is being started by this PPP. Are you hear me tonight? Because sometimes you all feel that things bad and you all don't realize what the fire under our ass in Guyana. They are the PPP saying, we want to dominate. And we are taking the chance. Because if we are going to dominate, we have to control. And we know if we have to control, there's going to be resistance eventually to our control. And we are prepared to fight down that road. That's where they're taking us. And you all have to understand that. Indian people have to understand that. Indian people have to understand that. If the government changes tomorrow, Indian people will start crying. They will start crying. Today, I have grown up as a little boy. I always hear, every now and again, I hear Hungry Belly Black Man. I hear a whisper. Now it has become the national pastime. Hungry Belly Black Man is part of the national discourse coming from the side of our Indians and brothers and sisters. We have degenerated. The PPP has degenerated us to that point where what we used to whisper, what we used to whisper has now become policy, has now become the national discourse. And I'm telling you, me mama black, me daddy black, me body and sissy they black, me picnic they black. And if you are going to disrespect black people, I will push my Marxism aside. I will push all my isms aside. And I will stand up there at the gate to stop you from devouring me mama, me daddy, me sissy, me body, and me picnic them. Takumu gon say, you don't have to be responsible for what I say.
No. I support every word you say. And I mean, I have been trying to control what I say on this public space. Not because I'm afraid. I'm being very frank. Something I'll be frank. Because I'm waiting to see what the PNC will say on this constitutional reform business. Because, we have to have a mobilization of African people. Okay, that is unprecedented in any elections that we have in the country. And it has to start before the elections in the constitutional reform struggle and go itself right into the elections. But to shape that mobilization, you have to get a clear end game. I will be comfortable if the PNC come out and say, look, we're fighting, we're going to take all elections, but we're saying win or lose, we have to move to share government immediately. It might sound wayward, but in politics, you have to say what is it you want. And when you say what is it you want, it becomes easy, okay, for allies and supporters, to help you. And I know if tomorrow the PNC clarify this matter on governance, we could begin in a few weeks, change this reality that we face with. But you hang strong on where the PNC stand on this. We know where the PPP stand on the governance and one-party domination. But you also want to know where the PNC stand on the very question, because you can't separate the two. And this is seriousness, because if they want to go in another way and take all the elections without committing to share governance, win or lose, then what they're doing is actually supporting the PPP dominance line of march and creating the very conditions to African people that we are trying to fight against. So it is important that we say these things. But at the end of the day, whatever the PNC decide, they have a right to decide. There's a political party. But as WPA, we have to be careful that we stand with African people, regardless of what the PNC do, and regardless of whether we go into the elections as a coalition or separately. We have to be a bulwark in defense of African interests, and in so doing, we're defending Guyanese interests. We have to be clear about that. And that got to be an unwavering commitment we give to the African community and the nation, that the WPA, regardless of how the politics play, would be a bulwark in defense of African dignity, African survival, and fairness and equity in this country.
Fairness and equity in this country. But Takumo Ogunse, co-leader of the Working People's Alliance, tonight we've been discussing politics and economics in Guyana. Of course, we give you our perspective. Our end game is our nation. Our end game is the safety of our people, all of our people, all races, all classes in this society. We cannot afford to exclude everyone, any one group here in this country. And as we are saying, we have made a determination that in terms of the power dynamics in this society, African people are on the end that is taking blows. And morally, politically, it is right for us to stand in solidarity and in defense of that group. After all, when Indians in the 1970s and the 1980s were in a similar position, we stood with them. You're looking at two men here tonight who combined spent over 6 years in jail fighting against a black government. Today they call us racists. Racists don't fight against their own. Racists uplift their own, whether they're wrong or right. Ask Jack Dio and Irfan Ali if they ever spend 1 hour in jail. Ask them. Ask them. Nobody wants to go to jail, but part of when you fight, you expect that your life and your liberty would be on the line. And we here, Takumo Ogunse and David Hines, we are the living example. When an African government was in power and an Indian population felt that that African government was discriminating against them and oppressing them, we stood with them. Because we know in standing with them, we are standing with our own. We know that in standing with Indians, we knew then, standing with Indians meant also standing with what is good for Black people and what is good for Amerindian people. And we are yet to see now this government is doing 10 times worse, 20 times worse, 100 times worse than what Burnham did. And Indian brothers and sisters with voices like ours are cheerleading this government, refusing to feel the pain of African people. They go and they must see the comments where their supporters are calling Black people dogs and hungry belly and so on. And they say nothing about it. In the end, what they do is through their policies try to prove that Black people are less than human beings. Who in their right senses would feel that in 2024, a country with billions and billions of dollars, that you can go to a community of Black people and give them $40,000, dress them up with red jerseys and carry them to a PYO conference and call that. My God, I've studied slavery. I've studied slavery. And that is slavery. That is slavery. And I'm not going to stop telling Black people that. That is slavery. And we beat slavery. And we must beat this. We beat slavery. And we must beat this modern day slavery. But we have to commit ourselves to doing it. We have to commit ourselves to doing it. We have to commit ourselves to doing it. Brother Takumo, go and say your closing thoughts.
We in the WPA are grateful that we have Professor Thomas in our ranks, and more particularly as it relates to the cash transfer discussion, we have been able to revisit it to its correct place as an important anti-poverty tool. And I'm very hopeful that we will eventually win this proposal so it could benefit all Guyanese households. And I think that that is a commitment we have to constantly remind the nation of, that this thing is about giving Guyanese households an annual predictable sum of money. And Clive Thomas argued how it could be used, okay, as an investment instrument. You could borrow on the basis of it. It's predictable income. It's not a one-off thing and you never know whenever you won't get it. If you have a reliable cash transfer system in place that everybody knows that every Guyanese household will get this money, then the household is in a position to use that as a financial instrument, okay, to engage in economic activities that would be unable to do without that predictable and guarantee income. And these are the things that we have to painfully remind people that as we go forward, we must not become, as you quite correctly point out, the PPP is turning us into hustlers and lower-level hustlers, where we just concern with ourselves, not in a profound way, but in a superficial way. We believe if we get $100,000 or $200,000, it's heaven come down on earth. No, you will sell quickly after 3-4 months, you back in your same position. Whereas the WPS proposal, and I try to make it simple, it's like old age pension, where every old age person know once you reach 65, okay, you have a money that you could commit on. It's the same kind of principle. We want a cash transfer system rooted in the law, where households know that every year, if it's the 1st of January or the 1st of September, whatever we agree, this money will be available. It will be in my account. Okay, it is predictable. I could plan exactly what I'm going to do with the money this year. I could plan what I'm going to do the next year. And we are convinced that the majority of Guyanese households will use that money constructively to improve the economic situation of the entire household. And it is very few people who may misuse or abuse this situation, as you find in any social policy. You can never get 100% results that everybody do the correct thing. And you have to fight with those who are not doing what you expect, and there must be some reason, and the social scientists and the psychiatrists and the other people who have to come in, welfare people, will have to come into play. But to end, I want to say that Guyanese must know and believe we can't lose on this matter. It has to happen, and it has to happen very soon. And once we are rooted to that, I'm telling you, it will happen faster than you think. And that is the struggle we have as political people, to try to convince people. And what might look like an impossibility, because I hear some people saying, man, while I agree, I want the $1 million, this $100,000, we sure it will come, but but we ain't too sure whether the cash transport going to be agreed upon. So they're playing on the weakness of the poor. But we have to remind people that ultimately, this money is your money, our money is our money, and we have a right to determine, okay, the priorities of the spending of this money, and cash transfer to every Guyanese household must be for us one of the major priorities, and we must prepare when the time is right to bring the country to a standstill on this matter. We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to future generations.
We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to future generations. Takumo Ogunse, co-leader of the Working People's Alliance. We've gone the distance tonight and you all have stayed with us. Those of you who would like to become members of the WPA, please contact Brother Kedaki Amsterdam, our organizing secretary, and he will arrange for you to sign up the necessary forms and to become part of this movement. Because we're not just a party, we're a movement. And movements ultimately are the engines of liberation. Good night. Until tomorrow night.
When we speak of civil liberties and civil rights, people are beginning to understand that the most fundamental of these is the right to work in our society. And what is occurring in Guyana is that the government is making political capital out of the indefensible position of one who is either unemployed or is very close to the line of being unemployed.
I want to say to you all, in no uncertain terms, that this government is disrespectful to black people. And if people disrespect you, you have a right to disrespect them.
I am saying now that we have started, now that we have come together, do not sleep. Don't let us go back quietly into the night. Protest must be the order of the day.